Hi, everybody. Welcome back to class. Today is Sunday, March 13th. Welcome back from spring break. I hope everyone had a good time. With the week off, I certainly know I did, but it's time to get back to work. This week, we are going to jump into class session 9 and begin working on the Toulmin argument. There's a lot of reading for this week, and you'll also be turning in your first draft. Now, I don't design this course, it's kind of given to me in the format that it is. If I had input on this, I would ask you to do the annotated bibliography for this argument first and then turn in the draft. I think this is a little backwards, but this is what we have to work with, so that's what we'll do. I'm going to open Class Session 9 folder and point out a few things to you. There is a lot of reading, as I mentioned, for this session. And if you open up the readings folder, you'll see that there is a number of articles to be read. None of them is too long, but rather than have you open each of these individually, if you simply open the introduction link, you'll see all the links that you have to read listed here. So I think this is easier. When I opened some of the individual links, they weren't working exactly well. So just open the introduction guide and you can read them all here. I recommend you print these off and make sure that you read all of them. Now for the Toulmin argument, we are of course writing about the same subject that you wrote about for the classical argument, so you don't need to come up with a new topic. But the important difference about this type of argument as opposed to the classical argument is that it takes a more head-on approach with trying to convince people by spending more time refuting the claims or the counter-arguments of others. And I think if you take a look at anticipated objections and rebuttals, this is the only one I'm going to open up individually because I know you'll go through all these. This one's pretty good. And it gives you an example of a rebuttal here, the anticipated objection, and then how you answer that with rebuttal evidence. So you know that claims are out there that state that your opinion is wrong, and you want to voice those in the same language that you would use if somebody was countering your argument in a verbal discussion. You make their claim as they would state it, and then use your own evidence to contradict it. I won't go through this entire article. You notice that it continues on to the next page here. But of all of that you have to read, make sure you pay particular attention to this one, because it really is the heart of the argument. There's also a video on logical fallacies. I'm going to open up this folder, but I won't go through these videos because I know you will. But logical fallacies really refer to a person trying to make an argument but using the wrong grounds, and by doing so makes their argument weaker. And notice these are pretty short, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and there's also something on false dichotomies that I want you to take a look at as well. That's only 3 minutes long. Make sure you view those. But let's get into the assignment itself. I'll mention, but won't go into this further, when you've finished your first draft, this is the assignment folder. It's only worth 25 points. So by simply hitting the word requirement and giving us something that we can analyze and give discussion upon, you're going to satisfy the grounds of the argument. The peer reviews, which we'll be doing next week, and turning in the annotated bibliography will make your argument stronger. But for now, it's most important that you take your subject and use the Toulmin argument form correctly. That's mostly what I'm going to be looking for. So this is where you'll be turning it in. But I want to spend more time looking at the assignment folder because I think it's more important. This is the same PowerPoint that we looked at previously about the Toulmin argument and its model. Here are the instructions. Excuse me. Again, we're using the same topic as the classical argument. And everyone has avoided these successfully, so I don't need to spend any time reviewing that. Notice as it mentions, and we bring this up a lot because I think it's very important, you are arguing your position while refuting your opponents. And those are equally important. It's not just about stating your case, but it's about rebutting the opinions of those that disagree with you. Notice that the audience is not necessarily me or the other people in the class, but the people who are or should be most interested by your topic and your perspective. As always, we're only using MLA, not APA. The style exercises, which I will point out to you in just a few minutes, are important in helping you develop your form. And I recommend that you go through those style exercises and worksheet before you begin to draft. It'll help. As those will point out, there are 6 parts of an effective argument, and they're all detailed in those additional handouts. But here is more or less a synopsis of what those will tell you. I want the audience to believe whatever your issue is. And then follow this form. I believe this because of the reasons, the evidence, the support that you give to it. And as I mentioned before, equally important, what are the views of those who disagree with you, and how are you going to rebut them? And so on with the warrant, the backing, the rebuttal, and the qualifier. For your draft, including works cited, 1,200 to 1,500 words. Make sure you look carefully at your word count. Some in the classical argument went well over the requirement. That's great. There were 1 or 2 who were a little bit short. So make sure that you're checking your word count. And if you're using Word, and all of us are, if you simply look at the bottom of the page, it'll tell you how many words you've got. The due date for this draft will be this coming Sunday, which is March 20th. So you have a week to work on this. And again, looking at the grade rubric, there are only 25 points for this draft. The final version will be worth a great deal more, of course, but we won't get there until after you've gotten peer review from me, and also worked on your annotated bibliography. Let's take a look at the style exercises. This one gives you sample topics and a couple of points that the person could potentially argue, and then also gives you a couple of open-ended questions. So for example, let's look at number 2. Ivy Tech should adopt a better learning management system because Blackboard's slow and limited functionality impedes student online learning, all of which I agree with. And then look at what is the claim. Ivy Tech should change. What is the backing? What are the reasons? In other words, it's slow and it has limited functionality. And what would be the warrant? Online learning is dependent on good technology. I think anyone seeing this would agree with those 3 points. Now, that is not the entirety of the argument. You then need to back these up, but also need to include people who would say that Ivy Tech does not need to replace Blackboard with another platform. And here are some that you can think about, points number 4 and number 5, and fill these in. Do this as an exercise for yourself. You don't need to turn this in. You may not even need to write it down. You might want to just spend some time considering, if you were constructing the argument for number 4 and number 5, what would you say? That'll get you in the right frame of mind of how you're going to construct your own argument. And here is the worksheet I mentioned previously, and I think this one's pretty good. And again, you don't need to turn this in. This is only for your own use. But knowing that you have your topic already in mind because you're recycling it, print this off. You could handwrite it, you could type on it, whatever you think. And this will provide you with a form to follow of what your argument should look like. It's an outline, in other words. And if you're able to answer all of these questions, notice they all have a question mark, with a sentence or two, when you begin to draft, have this on your desk or wherever it is you're writing and refer back to it. It's going to make this form a lot easier. We're really not necessarily trying to construct a brand new argument. You are using the same argument that you did before. But the difference between assignment 1, the classical argument, and this type of argument is the form that you are using. You may not necessarily have completely new conclusions. You may not have completely new evidence, but you're going to state that evidence and come to those conclusions following a different path. And as I've mentioned, I think now for the 4th time, this argument is heavily dependent upon listing the objections and your rebuttals to them. And it's important that you list the objections not with a jaundiced or prejudiced eye, but state them as somebody would who disagrees with your point of view. Write the words as if they were saying them themselves, and then use your own language and your own terms and your own definitions and your own evidence to shoot those arguments down, so that when the person reads this argument, they can only come to the conclusion that you are the person that has the proper perspective, because you've included what people are saying who disagree with you. It's a very effective version of argument. You see a lot of legal arguments constructed in this manner. In a courtroom, a defense attorney will often lay out the same charges that a prosecutor would, but then show evidence as to why the prosecution is in error. And the prosecution, by virtue of this environment, will almost do exactly the same thing. So to recap, and I didn't even go through the PowerPoint, but I believe you've seen that before. For class session 9, there's a great deal of reading, and I did hear for 1 to 2 students over the course of spring break asking questions about this argument form, which I welcome. You can contact me anytime. But most of the questions that I received were related to how do I structure this argument. And it was a good discussion. Make sure you do all the readings enclosed. And remember, you can find all of the reading material from following that first link, Introduction. Take a look at the video on logical fallacies. There are 3 of them, but they're very brief. This is where you would turn in your draft once you have completed it. But before you get to that, make sure you follow everything that's contained within this folder, particularly the last item we looked at. It will give you a blueprint, a format, a roadmap to follow when drafting it. And that will be it for this week. In next week, in week 10, session 10, we will get to doing peer reviews and working on the annotated bibliography. I hope everybody had a great spring break. I know I did. Welcome back to class. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you again. And if you need to chat with me, you can reach me anytime at 812-498-4200. That's my text number. You can email me at mstenger and the number 1 at ivtech.edu. Make it a great week, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.